I'm Asher Westropp-Evans and this is Immutable Opinion. Hey Ma, so I bought some Bitcoin. What is it? It's the hottest thing in the world right now. Okay, but what is Bitcoin? You know, this is really kind of a good question. Because despite having been around for a good 12 years now, the question around what Bitcoin actually is and is not is still not entirely settled. In fact, I'd argue in many ways it's more up in the air than ever. So given how good 2020 has been to Bitcoin, and the fact that now every man and his dog has an opinion on Bitcoin, let's take a look at some of the narrative contenders for what is this funny internet money. And full credit to Hasu, whose visions of Bitcoin article inspired this piece. Alright, kicking us off, Ecash proof of concept. This is the grandpappy idea, and the first major narrative to grip the enthusiasts of the Bitcoin space before there was much space even really to speak of. The crux of this idea is that since all prior Ecash attempts had failed, it took a decent amount of proof for people to be convinced of its technical and economic viability, and move on to more expansive conceptions of the protocol. And that brings us to number 2, cheap P2P payments network. An extremely popular narrative, it seems unwilling to die. Some believe that this is what Satoshi had in mind in the original vision, a currency for peer-to-peer internet transactions, sort of like a decentralized PayPal or Venmo. But key to this theory is that Bitcoin should be easier and more convenient than existing mechanisms for making small, regular transactions. Something that many, Roger Ver included, would argue that its lethargic transaction rate, Bitcoin, fails to achieve. Moving on to number 3, censorship-resistant digital gold. On the other side of the P2P payments coin is the view that Bitcoin primarily represents an immutable, deflationary, self-controllable wealth store, which has the ability to be largely independent of banks or the state. Proponents of this view say that Bitcoin is not designed for everyday transactions, instead arguing that what sets Bitcoin apart is its security, predictability, and stability. This narrative has taken deep root in the mind of many, particularly institutional investors, who are taking to Bitcoin as a hedging alternative to classic safe haven, gold. Moving on to private and anonymous darknet currency. Now, this is the view that Bitcoin's use is primarily for anonymous or even pseudonymous online transactions. In particular, fans of this theory consider Bitcoin's ability to facilitate online commerce away from the prying eyes of regulators. This idea is not mutually exclusive to the e-gold idea, as many believers of the digital gold view believe privacy is important. But this view falls down somewhat as more chain analysis companies come on board and regulators figure out how to track those using a network that literally records all your transactions on a ledger for all time. Go figure. Alright, so moving to the next idea, which is the reserve currency for the cryptocurrency industry. Now, this is a view that Bitcoin serves as a fundamental structural purpose, the native currency for the crypto industry. This economically centered perspective suggests that just as in the international trade market, Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency in which the prices of other assets are to be quoted. Consequently, traders, businesses, and distributed networks that hold reserves in Bitcoin de facto endorse this view via their portfolios. Programmable shared database. Now, this niche perspective on Bitcoin has been absorbed in recent years and somewhat muted by the growth of the Ethereum and DeFi networks, respectively. But regardless, holding that Bitcoin can embed arbitrary data, not just currency transactions, those holding this view tend to see Bitcoin as a programmable protocol with much broader use cases. In 2015-16, it was popular to express the notion that Bitcoin would eventually absorb a diverse set of functionalities through sidechains. However, it is a view rapidly falling out of favor. As I said, those bigger networks are taking more of an important role in this space. Uncorrelated financial asset. This is a view of Bitcoin that treats it strictly as a financial asset, yet in a class all its own. The most important feature of this idea is that Bitcoin's tendency to have a low or non-existent correlation to all manner of indexes, currencies, or commodities makes it an attractive portfolio diversifier. Proponents of this view generally want to buy Bitcoin-related risk, like a Bitcoin ETF, not necessarily spot Bitcoin itself, due to the lack of comfortable on and off ramps. This view has gained a lot of ground over the years, yet is constantly being tested to see if Bitcoin really holds up to the uncorrelated claims. So, there we have it. What is Bitcoin? It could be any number of the things I just mentioned, or perhaps none at all. But regardless, that won't stop those involved with the network from putting every label imaginable into the little b. As for me, as I said at the start, I think it's just internet funny money. But you know what? Prove me wrong. I'm Asher Westropp-Evans, and this is Immutable Opinion.